Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Nicole.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline. Welcome to Perfictionist, where we share our passion for reading one story at a time.
Hey there, and welcome to Books and Bevies. This is a place where we dive into the wonderful world of books while sipping on some tasty drinks. Today's episode is extra special because we're going to be doing our mid-year book update. And I cannot believe that we're already halfway through the year. I feel like every year goes faster and faster. And it just
Yes.
needs to slow down.
Yes.
But in this episode, we'll be sharing our thoughts on the best reads so far, our current favorite characters, couples, authors, and kind of our thoughts on our reading style.
Whether you're looking for recommendations or just want to hear our bookish banter, you're in the right place. And to make our chat even more enjoyable, we recommend sipping on a refreshing summer breeze mocktail, a mix of fresh orange juice, pineapple juice, a splash of grenadine, and a hint of sparkling water. It's the perfect drink to celebrate the halfway mark of our reading journey. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join us for a fun and reflective mid-year book chat. Cheers to great books and even greater conversations.
All right, so I think we'll do this one kind of similar to how we did our end of the year wrap up, where we'll just pose a question and then answer it. I think I've seen a couple different people do it. So some of these questions were things that I've seen other people answer, and some of them were just things I was curious to know your thoughts on and what your answers were. So are you on track for meeting your reading goals? I feel like this is the standard question that is asked in these types of videos or episodes is are you on track to meet your goals?
Oh my gosh. That sounds like so much pressure.
I know, right?
Do you have reading goals?
I don't really have a reading goal in this fact that I want to read 50 books this year or 100 books this year. I don't set a number goal.
Yeah.
I'm just I have a list of books that I would love to read this year because I'm really excited to read them. So I would love to get to them this year. So that's, I guess, my reading goals is to get to a specific books that I'm excited about.
That makes sense.
I've done somewhat that. I have read most of the Lunar Chronicles, which is something I was really excited about reading. But there's a whole list of other books that I haven't gotten to. And as you know, I've read the first ACOTAR book, but have not finished the series. So that is another one. I'm I have to finish that by the end of the year.
Yes, please. This is igniting some memories for me because we had talked about what our reading goals were for the following season. And yeah, so far I have not actually even delved into any of those books that I mentioned. I got completely sidetracked with another series that I'm actually rereading. And I'm just in that whole paranormal romance vibe. I think it was because we're doing the Arcana Chronicles this season, and then I just reignited my love all over again for Cressley Cole, so then I dove right back into her Immortals After Dark. And there was a book that actually got released, The Witch Queen of Halloween by Cressley Cole.
I saw that.
Yeah, and so of course I was so curious, so I had to read it. And it's just a short novella, but I enjoyed it so much, and I was I need to read the series again. So I completely chaotically abandoned my goals and just started rereading the series.
Oh, that's lovely though. That's what reading's all about though. Who really cares if you've met your reading? I think some people kind of take it quite seriously and then it's a sense of pride to reach those goals. But reading is supposed to be for entertainment. And there's obviously other reasons to read, but I think for us, it's mainly for entertainment.
Yeah.
And to just push everything else aside and be no, I want to do this. This is what feels right at the moment.
Yeah. Reading for me has always been a sense of comfort. So, I don't know, putting on some reading goals. Actually, it might be kind of fun, but I just want to be so careful about how I treat my reading because it's always been such a special time for me to enjoy time with myself. So I just would really hesitate to put any kind of pressure on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I definitely want to read that the new Cressley Cole book, but I'm saving it for Halloween. So I'm in the vibes when I read it. Because I'm assuming it's based around Halloween.
It's got really good Halloween vibes. I think that they had, I want to say, I feel like they were trying to release it by Halloween last year, but for some reason it didn't work out. So it
Mm.
ended up being released in the spring. But I was like, I am rereading this on Halloween because it is such good Halloween spooky vibes.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about like the marketing behind that. If they like were planning on doing it maybe last year around Halloween, like you said, but
Hmm.
missed it. I wonder what the decision was to them release it in spring instead of waiting until the following Halloween.
From the group that we're in, that her personal assistant runs, I
Hmm.
think that there was just so much. Now I obviously can't speak for them, but there was so much anticipation from the fans that
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters so much when she releases it because everybody's so thrilled. Like, obviously, it would have been really cool for it to release actually on Halloween. That would have been really cool.
Hmm.
But even around, yeah, the spring is like the opposite time.
But like you said, if the fans are just excited about the world that she's built and like all the different things that she's put out, and they're just like, I don't care, just give it to me.
Hmm. Oh, so we're going to talk about five-star reads or the favorite book we've read so far this year. Uh, Me personally, like I'm kind of stumped on this one. I haven't read anything that super sticks out to me. Like most of my books that I've read this year have been rereads. So it's
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
So they're all kind of 5 stars in a way.
yes, yes. Yeah, no, I think all the books I've read, I've been really enjoying. But again, they're all rereads. So
Of the rereads, which one would you like recommend? Like which one has been your favorite and you're like, this is one I think that anyone and everyone should read.
Well, I don't think anyone and everyone would enjoy what I've been reading this year because it is paranormal. It's very steamy paranormal romance. It's all been mostly Cressley Cole. Um, Last night I just finished Lothair.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It's about a vampire, and he's known as the enemy of old in the world. He's extremely powerful. So I had forgotten how much I enjoyed that one because the fated mate he's paired up with couldn't be more different than he is. And it's really amusing because she's from the Appalachian Mountains and from a very
Mhm.
poor family.
And
and
he's
he's
like a
and
rich
he's
old vampire?
well, he's vampire royalty.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, and he's very evil. So yeah, it was a
Wow.
really, I forgot how much I enjoyed that one.
I don't know if it's just me and kind of the people who I surround myself with, but I feel like everyone's really excited about vampires again all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like vampires are one of those timeless creatures that just come in and out of popularity, and they're never gonna fall out of favor because they'll come back in favor 10 years later.
No, exactly. It's like they're always kind of lingering around, but then like there'll be like points in time where they're like really, really popular, and then other points
Mhm.
where they're just kind of sitting back waiting for their next time.
Mhm. Yeah.
My, I guess, only 5-star read I've had this year is completely different. It's, I guess, like a contemporary, I don't, young adult, contemporary young adult novel, and it is "If He Had Been With Me" by Laura Nowen. And it was just one of those books where at the end I was just like devastated by it.
Oh,
And just
yes.
kind of like, but like the entire time you're reading it and you're just like, it just seems like, I don't know, kind of goes up and down. It's like a contemporary. So it's somebody, it feels like you're like listening in on somebody's life and like their experiences. And it is set in high school. And oftentimes I don't enjoy reading books about people in high school.
Mhm.
And just because I'm not in that period of my life anymore and it can feel really juvenile. This did not
Mhm.
feel juvenile at all. It felt like more nostalgic and it just, I don't know, there was something more gritty to it. And then at
Mm.
the end, you're just like, I don't know, grab a box of tissues. It's
Wow.
and it warns you beforehand too. It's like you know in the back of your heart or like in the back of your mind, you know what's coming, but it doesn't matter. You are not prepared. And it just kind
Wow.
of like sits with you.
Oh, ooh, yeah. All the ones that make me feel emotional like that, definitely. I've always considered five-star.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was actually a moment in Lothair that made me cry, and I was like, I do not recall crying about this before. And it's like Cressley's writing is so humorous too that like it's not something you'd expect necessarily, like, to something to get upset over. So I was like,
Yeah,
what is this? This is really good.
yeah. I
Are you
I love that when a book can go from making you laugh hysterically to making you just, like, so emotional, and you're
Yes.
just like, "Wow, this author's doing something, and I am eating it up."
What are you reading currently?
Currently, I am reading The Divine Rivals, or just I think it's just called Divine Rivals, sorry,
Oh, cool.
and it's really good so far. I'm not super far into it, I just started a couple days ago, and then I started a series on Kindle. It's like a Peter Pan retelling. I think it's called The Never King is the first book, and I just finished that today, and, um, I'm just looking to see what the series itself is called. Vicious Lost Boys series.
Oh my.
Nikki St. Crow is the
Mm.
author, and it's really, really dark, but I'm enjoying the fantasy elements in it. It's quite an interesting world that is being created. And
Ooh.
then I also just started reading. Oh, and Divine Rivals is by Rebecca Ross, if
Right.
anyone was wondering. And the third book that I've just only read the first chapter of it, is called The Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by Sophie Irwin. And it is kind of like a Bridgerton vibes
Fun.
book. And this girl um, just lost her parents, and she has like four younger sisters or something like that. And it's up to her to like snag a rich husband so that her family isn't in ruin and loses their house and all this. And I think it's going to be really, really funny. The first chapter was hilarious.
That's awesome. There's a romance author I enjoy that a lot. A few of her books, well, at least one I can think of, has that same idea, but it's more serious and more
Oh, okay.
Harlequin romancy. And it's Brenda Joyce.
Oh,
She
okay.
does some really nice period romance stuff. If you're into that sort of thing.
Did you ever watch the movie Persuasion? That had like the newest one that came out, and it was supposed to be kind of like a parody of the
Oh
whole.
no, the
Yeah,
one with what's her name? The 50
I
Shades
can't.
of Grey girl.
Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
girl from.
I haven't seen it.
I think this book is kind of trying to do that thing, but like I know a lot of people didn't really like how the movie was done and
Mm.
kind of were like, "Oh, it's too cheesy," like kind of went too far with the humor. So I'm
Oh,
thinking like this book is kind of going to do what that movie set out to do, but
does it
hopefully
sort
better.
of break the fourth wall kind of thing?
I don't think the book's gonna, like, break the like, I don't think that the character in the book's gonna start talking to the reader or anything like
Mhm.
that. I don't know if I've ever read a book that does that. I've only seen movies that they do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
That'd be in I don't
Hmm.
know. I'm sure there's books out there. There must be.
A new concept.
There you go.
My goodness.
Or maybe it hasn't been done for a reason,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
one or the other.
Maybe it just doesn't work. I'm reading a book right now called Pieces of Her by Karen Slaughter.
Ooh,
Nice
that's, like,
name,
quite the
right?
name.
I know. She
And
writes
it
like
pieces of her?
pieces of her. She writes like crime thrillers,
Ooh.
and her name is Karen Slaughter.
I mean, either she chose that name because she's
Right.
a crime writer.
Like a pen name.
Pen name, yeah, or she was born with it and was like, "What else am I gonna do with the
I
name
mean,
Slaughter?"
I need to do something that involves crime.
Yeah.
That it's actually kind of a cool name. Like it's
It's such a cool
memorable.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very serious. I've only gotten a few chapters in. Well, I mean, obviously because I just finished my other book last night. And it's intense so far.
Yeah, is, like, the mystery part good? 'Cause is it a mystery?
Um so I mean, there's a definite, oh yeah, mystery element for sure. It's not like one of those like detective mysteries. The main
Mhm.
character is the daughter of someone who it seems like isn't who her daughter believed that she has been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. I
Mhm.
like that, like, crime, mystery. I feel like almost every book that has some part where you don't know the answer to it and you have to keep reading to find out. I
Mhm.
don't know. That just gets me every time. I'm
I
almost
ex
like every book needs that.
Yeah, I expect to see some pretty decent character development from the main character because she started off at a pretty, I wanna say, low place in life, at least definitely mentally.
Mhm,
So, I think she's been thrust into this, like, insane situation, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
mhm.
It was highly recommended to me, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Ooh, well, if you end up liking it, I hope we hear more about it.
Yeah.
Do you have a new author that you've read this year who's, like, really grabbed you and you're like, "Oh, now that I've read them, I want to, like, keep reading their works?"
No, because I've been reading authors I know.
Mhm.
But I will say though that the Karen Slaughter, like the way that she writes, she has quite a few books out. So I would say, yeah, just going back to Karen Slaughter, I will probably be reading a lot more of her books.
Uh,
If I discover I really enjoy this book, I'll probably go on a Karen Slaughter binge. Like
yeah.
last time I found a crime writer that I really, really liked, Tammy Hogue. I endeavored to read every single book she's ever published. so
And
that I
some.
Yeah, so I think that that might happen with Karen Slaughter as well.
Mhm. Do you know if she has, like is one of those authors who has, like puts out a book a year and you're, like, in for, the rest of this year just being Karen Slaughter books?
Oh, the Karen Slaughter year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure how like well, actually let's see here. Oh, these are not in chronological order, but oh my word. If I decide to get really into her books, then I have a lot to look forward to. There's quite a few here.
I always wonder when authors have that many books out, like, you almost wanna read them all to see just, like, how different they are and, like, kind of
Mhm.
the breadth of their ability to, like, create new stories.
Mhm. She I would be very curious because this book that I'm reading right now was published in 2018. I'd be curious to go back to one of her earlier published ones, like one in 2003, and see the
Mm,
difference because there's
yeah,
always such change. And then maybe work through her books more chronologically, like in terms of publication date, because then you can kind of see the growth happening as you read. But
mhm,
I haven't noticed that, like, with Tammy Hogue, I didn't notice that all of her writing was very consistent.
mhm.
So, I don't know. Other authors have very obvious, uh, I don't know, writing development, I guess you could say, like,
Yeah.
really obviously, like, finding their groove, and some people are just super consistent the whole way through.
Oh, no, it's interesting. You could, like if you were in university and studying, like, literature, you could probably do some sort of a final project or master's thesis or something on, like, the development of an author. That'd be
That would actually
interesting.
be really interesting.
I think for myself, of all the different authors I've read this year, the one that kind of jumps out to me the most, and technically, I first read a book of hers in December of last year, but it's Allie Hazelwood, and I just absolutely love the humor in her books. I just
I'm gonna have
find
to check her out. I remember you talking about her.
mhm. It's just for me, it's just the right kind of humor, and I always if I'm just wanting something pretty, like, easy breezy, nothing too heavy, I always find, like, that she's a good go-to. I feel like it's kind of like a Molly Harper in the sense that it's just, like, you can pick it up for a good time,
Yeah,
and you don't have to, like, think too hard about it. It's
it's
just a fun
light.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in all of the books that you have read so far this year, even if they're rereads, what is your, like, favorite character that you've
Hmm.
come across or be reintroduced to?
Yeah, my favorite character. What's her name? I know I know who she is. What's her name? Chloe Todd from the book McReeve by
Oh,
Krista
okay.
Cole. Yeah.
And, what makes her such an interesting character in your opinion?
She is the daughter of the sort of enemy of the lore, I want to say, without giving away too much. But she has no idea about the lore or that anything supernatural even exists.
Oh.
Uh, however, she she is also of the lore and is sort of coming into her immortal self, but has no idea what she is or that this even existed. So she's a professional human soccer player. So
Oh,
she's very driven. She's very tough. Uh, but then she's thrust into like a world that she had no idea even existed. And then, of course, how can she be a professional soccer player now that she's no longer a human? Stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
She's reminding me of Clary from the Immortal Instruments. Is that what it's called? Like the City of Bones series.
Yeah, the Mortal Instruments. Yeah.
But I'm sure that like the whole like soccer player thing and everything is obviously very different. But just like the fact that she's human, but actually she's not.
Yes, and actually I was reading on the group the other day, a lot of people have a lot of issue reading this, at least the prologue of this book, because of what happens to the male hero. And like, I'm going to butcher his name, but I feel like it's like William. I feel like it's William, but it starts with a U. So I
Okay.
want to say it's like William. I don't know. I feel like it's some version of William, but
Yeah.
and what happens to him is disturbing. And so people sometimes, once you've read it, people will skip it,
Mm.
probably depending on their own feelings regarding what happened.
Yeah.
But I hadn't read it in a long time, so I wanted to read the whole thing. And it's quite intense because, like how I mentioned earlier, Cressley writes with a pretty good, I want to say humor, but not like Molly Harper humor. Uh, it's more, I want to say sassy.
Hmm.
Her female characters are quite often pretty sassy.
Yeah.
Um, but she does touch onto some pretty sensitive topics, but she does it, in my opinion, I think she does it pretty well. And I think this one in particular is, yeah, it's pretty disturbing to think about.
Hmm. I do find sometimes when books have these more disturbing scenes in them, people get super hyper fixated on those, and they could be something that's like violent or something that's like sexual in nature, but then that becomes like the entire topic of conversation around that book. And the book itself is like has so much to offer, and it just gets overshadowed because people are like just so
Yeah.
affected by that one scene. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
sometimes
unfortunate.
unfortunate.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that I've been reading the Lunar Chronicles, and there is a character in that story called Aiko, and she's an android, but her like personality chip is there's something wrong with it. Although don't tell her that; she'll be very upset. And she acts too much like a human, and so she doesn't it's like
Oh.
she's an android, but she, like, wants to be human and thinks she's human and, like, cares about how she looks and, like, is just, like, this kind of, like, bimbo self-centered android, which is funny because, like, she's not supposed to have those kind of personal, wanting to improve herself. She's supposed to, like, serve the people, but she's, like, all into fashion and stuff, and it's hilarious.
Yeah,
And she's just, like, a really, really funny character in that series.
that's awesome. I'm gonna have to read that. I'm all intrigued now.
I really, really enjoyed the Lunar Chronicles. It's a good read.
What about your favorite couple?
Oh, I would have to say that Emily Wilde and Wendell Brambleby, I think that's how I pronounce it, from the Emily Wilde Encyclopedia of Fairies. I found them so funny. They're academic rivals and they like despise each other, and but mostly it's Emily despises Wendell, but he like secretly is in love with her, and she's just like, I don't know, she just hasn't like wants nothing to do with it. But at this, like, I don't know, it's just they have this very, very interesting dynamic, and they're hilarious with each other, but they're like super like kind of blunt towards each other and always like 'cause they're rivals, so they have that banter and that rivalry going on, but at the same time, you can tell that they, like, really care about each other, but it's like neither of them will admit it, and it's really, really cute.
That's cute. Aw, that's fun. Mine would be, and now that I've given this a lot of thought because there's each book has a couple it focuses on, and I think with the first time I had read the series, this couple I didn't care about so much.
Mhm.
But when I read it this time, I found the whole thing to be so much more endearing for some reason. So I guess we change our opinions as we grow. Imagine that. Um, and so my favorite couple is Thronos, Talos, and Melanthe, the sorcerer.
Oh.
And the first time I was kind of like, he's so, and I mean, he's supposed to come off this way. So I think, I don't, gosh, these fantasy type things, like how do I pronounce any of this? It's a Vrekner prince, and she's a sorceress. And those two are like complete enemies for species.
Yeah.
And so when they meet when they're actually children, and they kind of like meet in secret, and he recognizes right away that she's his fated mate, right?
Oh, but it's like a Romeo and Juliet kinda thing?
Sort of. It doesn't go on that long because it just, oh gosh, what can I give up? But I want to say, like, okay, so they meet when they're children, and then something really bad happens that makes them hate each other. And they both hate each other for good reasons.
Yeah.
But because she's his fated mate, and she's the sorceress is sorcerer, they're always running away from the Vrekners. Like they're always being hunted, especially after what had happened. So her sister Sabine and Melanthe, they're always running away. And um it's really intense because he believes that so they look similar to the demons in the series. They've got the
Mhm.
horns and everything, but there's 4 horns instead of 2. But the Rechners are winged. And
Oh, okay.
so they where they live, it's like this plane that's sort of in the sky, that is invisible, like it's protected by magical, like I want to say wards or something, and
Mhm.
it moves. They can move it, so you can't find it, right, unless you're. And so it's called heaven. They call it heaven. So he believes he's like an angel, essentially,
Yeah.
like, and that the sorcerer are like, they're like the opposite because they revel in like um in good times, right? So
Mhm.
like drinking and sex and and they
Debauchery.
literally, yeah, they literally worship gold as their religion.
Oh, wow.
Uh, yeah. Whereas like his people are very like they're dressed like all body parts are covered. You learn later that I think I can, like, for example, when they first have
Yeah.
intimate relations, there's a sheet between them. Like it's
Oh,
very like, you know, religious feeling. I don't know
yeah.
how to like say it, but
Very modest.
and they have like their traditions, right? And they have like when each Reckner is born, they are made a bed of troth, it's called, and it's like this massive bed, and then that's supposed to be their marital bed where they like claim their mate or whatever. And when they do that in that bed, then they're considered married.
Oh, okay.
And you're not supposed to do anything like that unless you are married,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh,
very
that sounds
opposite.
yeah, that like, their cultures are very different.
Yes, and she suspects, due to his um demonic features, and they're like hundreds of years old at this point. She's seen a lot.
Yeah,
She's like, I believe you're descended from demons, and that is very insulting to him when he
because
thinks
he's
he's,
like he thinks he's an angel.
yes.
Okay. Oh, which book is this?
It is called Dark Sky. Let me
Dark
just
Sky?
let me just fact check that.
Okay. And, like, what series is it a part of as well?
The Immortals After Dark series.
Ah, that sounds so interesting. I was hoping I had that one. And because these don't have to be read in order. Like, you can read the Cressley Cole books in this series out of order.
Mhm.
Oh, there's something about the way you describe that and, like, the whole fact that they're fated, but they truly hate each other because for some legitimate reason, not just, like,
Yes.
a flippant thing.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds so interesting, and I'm like, I need to try and find that book.
Yeah, and I really like Melanthe. Like, the second time around reading about Melanthe, I was like, "I like her." Like, I just didn't she didn't make too much of an impression on me the first time I read it. But the second time around, I really like both of them for different reasons. And yeah, I was kind of like, give me a break. Like when it was the first time I read like about Thronos, but the second time I read it, I was like, man, like his struggles are real.
Oh, no, it is
Yeah.
so interesting how you can view something differently if you're
Yeah.
reading it at a different stage in your life. I feel like
Yeah.
I know what your answer is going to be for this one, but what genre have you been reading the most so far this year?
Well, paranormal romance. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, according to my story graph, it's romance, and because like most of the books I pick, or at least obviously the majority of them, have some sort of romance. So it could be like more contemporary romance or more romantasy, and kind of my second uh, category is fantasy. So that
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Yeah. What book release are you most excited for?
Oh, I feel like at the beginning of the year, I had a whole list of books that I was really excited for, and then like I got sidetracked with a bunch of like older books that I was more excited to read. But I
Right.
did read Bride from Ali Hazelwood, which I believe came out this year, and I really enjoyed that one. And then one that I still would like to read that's kind of still on my radar, sorry, is The Tempest of Tea by Hafisa Fazal. I'm probably saying that
Hafisa.
very wrong. But that one, it just sounded very interesting. I can't even remember what the premise is because I read it a long time ago. But when reading it, I was like, that sounds really cool. I think it's like set in 1920s or like somewhere around that time. I think it involves gangs that like meet up
Cool.
at a tea house. But again, this could be a misremembering. But I remember being like excited to read it when I read about it.
I love the variety of books that you read. It's so interesting to hear about because I get set down a track and then I'm like glued to that with like almost an obsessive fascination. So it's nice to hear about other books in the world as well.
Not all books are paranormal romance,
Yeah.
which obviously you don't think that because I feel like your other kind of genre that you've been reading a lot is like survival stories or like
Yeah.
wilderness kind of style stories.
Sort of thrillers,
Mhm,
suspense. I've always liked thrillers and suspense. And I love fantasy as well. So
mhm.
and romance. But I've just been focusing on the paranormal romance this year.
It was so good. And I feel like it also was really big at like when we were kind of coming of age, when we were like
Yeah.
that older teenager, like
Yeah.
that's when paranormal romance had its like huge surge. So I feel
Yeah.
like we'll always love that genre
Mhm.
because it like holds that special place of like when you're at that age of like becoming an adult and
Yes.
I don't know.
So the release I'm looking forward to the most is a Cressley Cole book. It is the next Immortals After Dark installment, and it's supposed to release on December 3rd of this year. And it's
Oh.
called Shadow's Heart. And it's a full-length novel. So The Witch Queen of Halloween was a small novella. Really
Mhm.
good, though. Super steamy. And then this one is a full-length novel. So,
I didn't know she was still going with like
oh yeah.
on a slightly sad note, were there any books that you DNF'd this year?
Yeah. But I didn't DNF them because I was like, this is garbage. I DNF them because I just wasn't in the mood at the
Mhm.
time. I could tell that, like, I was like, this is something I will come back to. Okay, so Credence.
Yeah.
And the only reason I DNF'd it was just because I wasn't in the mood for that much devastation.
It's a heavy book.
So I was like, I can come back to this when I myself feel better.
Mhm.
Because I can tell I will enjoy it, but it's just not the right time for me right now. The other DNFs are just a bunch of, I mean, I guess this is a book podcast, doesn't have to all be fiction, but it's just some nonfiction parenting
Yeah.
type books that I don't know that I'll DNF them necessarily so much as refer to them when I feel the need to.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I do feel like the nonfiction books, it is more like, oh, like, yeah, I'll just read a chunk of it, and then I'm like, "Okay, I'm good." I don't necessarily wanna read the entire book or listen
Yeah.
to the entire book. I'll just wanna take a chunk and then come back for another chunk later. I get that. And I also DNF'd a book, but not because it wasn't enjoyable. I simply had to return it to the library, and so I wasn't able to
Oh,
finish it.
darn. Oh,
And
that's frustrating.
yeah, and I could have just, like, renewed like, rebooked it kinda thing, but there's I liked it, but I didn't like it enough that I'm like, "Oh, I need to, like, rebook it and get it back." So it's called Snow Globe by Soo Young Park, and it's a really, really interesting concept. It's, like, in a world that is it's kinda like Snowpiercer in the sense if you've, read or watched any of the, TV on Snowpiercer, it's like the world is permafrost. It's, like, too cold to
Ooh.
exist essentially outside. So everyone has to bundle up and they like all like work indoors and blah blah blah. So you can go outside for very short periods of time, but if you're outside for longer than 20 minutes, you basically freeze to death.
Whoa.
And but there's this dome world. So they've made this dome world where all like the celebrities live. So you get to live in the dome world, which is like a tropical paradise, permanently like set to like temperature control, blah blah blah, but you have to be a celebrity and like your life has to be broadcast. So it's like if you're
Hmm.
in the dome, then you are like everything about you is being recorded, like
Oh,
reality
interesting.
TV.
Oh, that
And
is
it's like
so interesting. I would love to see that in a movie or like
I
a
know.
yeah.
And I know there's going to be a second book coming out. Like this is the first of a duology. So I do want to come back to it um at some point because I think it's very fascinating. And the chapters I did read were good. I just when it went back, I had a whole list of other books that like had come in and I just kind of got sucked up in reading those. And yeah, now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I need to reorder that because now I want
Yeah.
to finish it.
I think I might like to read that too. That is intriguing.
Yeah, and it's in the description, it said it's Hunger Game meets something else. So I'm like, is there like a like is the competition just like everyone's competing to be on these reality TV shows, or is there like
Right.
another aspect of like competition that I haven't got to yet? So I don't know.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That reminds me of this show. Oh, shoot. I can't remember the name of it. Is it called Zero or something? I feel like the name of the show is a number, and it's not an American show. It's all subtitles. It's done in a completely different language. It is such a good show, and it reminds me of that. If I re
What's the premise of the show?
So it's been years since we watched, but basically everyone is in poverty except for
Mhm.
these select people that I can't remember if it's like a lottery situation. I might be getting that confused with the island. But then of course, when they are then going to go to this island or whatever, it's like this paradise
Yeah.
where they don't have to struggle. They have to be made infertile. But they didn't know that.
Oh.
So they're going through this whole thing where they're going to be made infertile. And then, of course, all hell breaks loose because some of the people are like, what?
Yeah.
But that's how they control the population in this paradise, is that everyone that
Oh,
goes there can't have kids.
interesting.
Yeah.
That does sound good.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of that same like is it like post-apocalyptic? I don't know, kind of like
Almost like a dystopian
dystopian, yeah.
vibe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's the right word. Oh, I love dystopian things. I always
Yeah, me
delve back
too.
in. Like, I don't ever, like, go through phases where I did read, like, a whole bunch, but I always like to dip my toe back in.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think your reading style has changed or your taste has changed as to your preferences?
I feel like this past year, I've been reading, like, listening to a lot more audiobooks just simply because of time
Mhm.
and not having time to necessarily sit down and physically read. So I've
Mhm.
been really taking advantage of listening to audiobooks. But I think that also came with the fact that like I was like introduced to Libby and like you can get audiobooks and then digital books on there. And it just makes it super easy. And I just rent them from the library. So that has definitely changed because before this year, I don't know if I'd like, or probably last year I started listening to audiobooks. But before that, I don't think I'd ever listened to an audiobook. Like I'd listen to podcasts and like other
Mhm.
like similar things like on YouTube, like where it's like stories or whatever, but through YouTube. But I'd never actually listened, I don't think, to an audiobook.
Right.
Unless it was like when I was a child and I don't remember.
They're very
So
enjoyable.
they're so enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to at some point try I forget what you called it, but it's like where they have a bunch of different actors. So it's like the audiobook, but like
Graphic
different.
audio.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. They're fun. It's intense because there's music and sound effects and everything. It's everything except the visual part.
Yeah. But if it's like done so well, you can probably just visualize it
Mhm.
anyways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest change for me. And like just the fact that I'm reading a lot more than I have. I've gone through
Mhm.
phases in my life where I've read more, but I've never like consistently read as much as I have this year.
Right. Yeah. I'm reading a lot less this year simply just because I'm working so much on my own projects. So,
Hmm.
with what little time I have in the day, it's usually being dedicated to my own projects. And then I'm reading for maybe half an hour before I fall asleep.
And it's so hard when you're doing that too, because it's like you'll just be getting into it. And then you're like,
Hmm.
I really need to make the adult decision to go to bed now.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a habit, and I've had this habit since I was a child where I'll be reading as I'm falling asleep. And I know it's time to put the book down when my eyes are starting to shut by themselves.
Yeah.
And I just slide the book over and just pass out immediately. I think that's all that we had for you today. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
In our next episode, we will be jumping back into the world of the Arcana Chronicles with our heavy spoiler discussion on Day Zero and Arcana Rising. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next time.